So I'm sure virtually all of you have seen the normal timeline that talks about the phases of DSCSA. It was signed November 27, 2013. The first phase went into effect in 2015. The second phase, which we normally think of as the serialization and verification phase, started last year, November 2017, and goes to 2020. And then there's the third phase, which I'll talk about towards the end of the US piece, which is the implementation of a fully electronic, interoperable traceability system at the unit package level. What we're focused on right now is this serialization and verification phase. And most of the time when we focus on this, a lot of the focus is on the serialization piece. What do I have to do to put a unique identifier onto the product and in what conditions? And for the US, it's easy to describe. More complicated to implement, but easier to describe. You have to apply a unique identifier onto a salable unit and onto homogeneous or common cases of product. And you have to put 4 data elements on it. You have to put 3 that are pretty common in almost every regulation: a serial number, a lot number, and an expiration. Now the US, we talk about it as the National Drug Code, the unique identifier of a product type, a packaging configuration, as the NDC, right? But that's not actually what's implemented in the product identifier. For shorthand, we actually talk in the US about applying a G10 plus the other 3 data elements. But that's not strictly accurate. If you got a global G10 from GS1 and you tried to apply it to a product in the US, that would be non-compliant. Because really what you need is the European or the US equivalent of an N10 that you have in Europe. What you actually put into the product identifier is the NDC code, which at manufacturer is a 10-digit code, and that is wrapped in a G10 structure. So it's 14 digits in total length. And there's a US country code, if you will, that's at the beginning of that. So really what we have is an N10, serial number, lot, and expiration date. So that always causes a little confusion for those companies that were implementing serialization for another market using G10s, like India, and thought they could just use that for the US. It doesn't work that way. But it looks pretty simple. 2 levels of serialization. As we see here, aggregation is not required, although there are many business reasons why a pharmaceutical company may want to do it, for trade partner reasons, for internal tracking in 3PLs, etc. The big complication comes in, though, is the fact that you can't just do serialization. Once you've serialized product, or once you are an entity that is required to only buy or sell to transact serialized product, the law and the FDA expects you to use that information. Okay? So you don't just set it on a package and send it in the supply chain. So there are a series of 3 different versions of verification that now require you to use the serialized information. There is the standard verification for suspect product investigations. If there's a reason to investigate a product, it may be counterfeit or stolen, diverted, etc. You are now supposed to use not only the transactional information, but you're supposed to use the product identifier to help determine if this is truly an illegitimate product or not. Okay? More concerning, and where I'll spend a few minutes, is saleable returns and request for verification. The law says that, and this is almost sort of similar to risk-based verification for the EU. If I'm a company and I sell a pharmaceutical product to a customer and they return the product back to me and it's in saleable condition and I want to resell it, I'm required to check the product identifier, to verify the product identifier before I can resell the product. So we see up here that basically anybody that sells product, even a manufacturer, if you get a saleable return, say back to your 3PL, you have to verify that product identifier. You've got to scan the barcode and check those 4 data elements in the product identifier. Now, how are you going to go about verifying that information? Well, if you're the manufacturer, it's pretty straightforward. You just look it up in your serialization repository. Or hopefully your 3PL has the ability to put that query to you. But if you're somebody in the supply chain, how do you verify that? What information do you use? Now, the manufacturer and a repackager for the US has a responsibility to respond to requests for verification. So typically you might say, oh, a wholesale distributor receives a saleable return. They want to verify the product. They might query the manufacturer who has the database and said, did you put this product into the marketplace? If that request comes in, the manufacturer has a legal responsibility to respond to it. Must respond to it. Now, the law says within 24 hours from the time that you get that in. As we'll see in saleable returns, the reality is much shorter than that. And why are saleable returns a problem? This was a surprise to the industry. 2015, nobody was talking about this. The HDA organization, the large wholesale distribution organization or association in the US, did a study in late 2015, 2016, trying to figure out how many saleable returns the major wholesale distributors, the members of HDA, received. Based on that study, 59 million saleable units a year are returned to wholesale distributors as members of HDA and are resold. Which means in 2019, because that's the deadline that wholesalers have on that chart, on the previous chart, for verifying the product identifier for saleable returns, 59 million units need to be scanned and need to have that information verified, perhaps back to the manufacturer. So what does that mean? A couple of things. One, it means while the wholesale distributor has this product and they get the return in, they're probably not going to want to wait 24 hours before they have information back to say, can I put this back into stock or should I quarantine it? So the industry, and I'll talk about the task force in a minute, has come up with a model where essentially the expectation from the wholesale distribution community is sub-second response time for a request for verification for 59 million units a year. Now, from an individual manufacturer, it can vary. And we know, we've talked to many TraceLink customers to get a sense, some have over 1 million saleable units a year of their product that they would be getting these inquiries in. A lot of them are smaller, tens of thousands, low 100,000 of units. So there's two models of how the industry was working on this. One was send the serialization data to the wholesale distributors. Give them the serialization information. Let them scan internally for that. The problem with that is a wholesale distributor has products from dozens, maybe hundreds of manufacturers. They're not going to get serialization data from everyone. So the other model was give the wholesale distributors a router system that allows them to ping a query into a system that'll route it to the right manufacturer for that particular product. So the HDA sponsored a task force January of 2017. TraceLink is a member of that task force to figure out a model for the industry to be able to catch these verifications for these 59 million verifications that are required each year. And fundamentally what it was not to create a system, but to create a model that solution providers could build. Because the belief was that there wasn't going to be one system, the government wasn't going to do it. There wasn't going to be one solution provider. And if there were multiple solution providers, there needed to be a standard interoperability model to allow solution providers to catch and coordinate, because some may have some manufacturers, some may have other manufacturers. So the goal really was to create a set of user requirements, system architecture requirements, functional requirements, and then a governance model to help support all of this. And so we've been working on that since July of 2017. And really simply, the technical diagram, this is the architecture diagram. The technical diagram is a little more complicated. But fundamentally, it says, if I am a distributor and I sell my product, let's say manufacturer A on the top, or manufacturer B on the top sells the product, or on the bottom sells the product to the distributor, and they sell it to the dispenser, and the dispenser returns it, and it's saleable. What the distributor does is they send, because they get products from lots of manufacturers. They need to route that verification request to manufacturer B, the one that they bought it from, that owns the product. So they send a verification response into the verification router service. The verification router service was populated with GTIN and links that match a particular product code to a particular manufacturer and the repository that the manufacturer has the serialization data to respond to a verification request. So the router service looks up in that lookup directory, it's like a telephone book, finds the data, routes the request to the manufacturer's system. Manufacturer's verification system verifies it, sends the response back to the router service, who then sends the response, yes or no, to the wholesale distributor. That's sort of fundamentally how it works. A lot of devil in the details behind that. And we've been making good progress on this. So we published the business requirements, we published the solution architecture, we have almost a final version of the technical specifications as well as the charter for governance of all of these systems. And what companies, TraceLink included, are doing is we're preparing now to start testing phases. Start testing phases of the solution themselves, start testing phases of the interoperability. So the industry has been working, I would say, fairly well together to tackle this problem for November of 2019. So one point that I would leave on this is we talk often at TraceLink about the fact you have to think about serialization as data you may produce as a pharmaceutical manufacturer, but it's data that's going to be needed, that has to be accessible by people outside of your company, not just your CMO, but your direct trade partners, or you can get verification requests from anybody in the supply chain that has your product. It could be a secondary wholesale distributor that you have no a priori knowledge or relationship of.